Now I'll switch from my matchmaker's hat to my research hat, and we'll talk about a project that we're implementing in Orissa. The project is titled Project Sammaan, or Project Sammaan in Hindi. So this is about providing sanitation solution for urban residents. Okay? And the general idea here is, the background here is that in urban areas, individual toilets are often not an option just because space is very limited. And in that case, you might have shared toilet facilities. That's the right infrastructure solution. So what Rohini was describing as public toilets, but we in this project make a distinction between, say, communal toilets versus public toilets. So communal toilets are providing services to a fixed community, a fixed population of residential area around the infrastructure. So that's the translation for the word Sammaan. And in this project, there's a very large team that I'll describe more fully, and just a few members of the team are here. Some representing the research side, the university side, and JPAL. Nirat Bhatnagar is representing the side of design for the project, design and implementation. And Mr. Pati is from the Bhubaneswar Municipal Corporation, and he is one of our main government counterparts who is actually constructing the infrastructure. In this project, we're seeking to both design innovative facilities that address the local demand for sanitation solutions in the cities of Bhubaneswar and Cuttack. So the target is to build about 119 communal toilet blocks. Okay? So think of a representative toilet block as being like a 10-seater. And sometimes, in our design process, as you'll hear from Nirat, we're making the toilet block not just about a sanitation solution, but also providing other associated services like bathing and washing, et cetera, that people might care about. Okay? And we build some randomization into the design process, and then we study the effects. And based on our mapping in this area, we expect about 60,000 people in these two cities, in slum areas in these two cities, to be directly benefiting by getting greater access to these services. Okay. And here, so I will just use this slide to describe how complicated the project is. And the reason I wrote up the slide like this is just to make the point here that if this partnership can work out, then pretty much anything can work out. There's just there's too many people involved, but it's still, it's going forward. Okay? So think about the problem of, in an urban area where there's limited space, and we now need to provide a shared solution for a community that's living in a slum. What the challenges would be. Okay? So what ends up happening is, the government builds infrastructure often, but soon they become decrepit, right? And people don't want to use them anymore, right? Sometimes the open defecation option is used because, well, first of all, as Rohini pointed out, people don't want to pay, but why don't they want to pay? If it's a very, very low quality facility, if it's smelly, if it's dirty, like the pictures she showed, then you don't feel like paying. Okay? So now, why is it that this happens? So our hypothesis is, one important reason this happens is because of the free riding problem inherent in a shared sanitation solution, right? So if it's not your own toilet, you're not going to be as careful in maintaining it, right? And so we wanted to see whether or not through interventions in better design, better governance, better management for the toilets, can we address the problem that people do not put enough effort maintaining a shared facility that they would if it was their own. And so there's two types of challenges here. So at the first broad level, we've divided up into the hardware and the software challenge. The hardware challenge is that we need to design facilities that people actually want to use. Okay? And that's the part that Nirat will go into a lot of detail on, so I won't dwell on that anymore. But I will just say that the experiment we're doing there is, so for example, if we were to make the toilet block into a utility block that also involves washing, bathing, etc., right? Things that people care about. That's of course costly. It's costly to build. It also takes away from the space that would be available for more toilets, right? And we're trying out two different designs, and then we're going to evaluate which works better. What do people like better? What do they continue to use better? What gets sustained more? Okay, so that's the hardware side. How should the design look? How should the infrastructure look? Okay, and on the software side, the main question is, who should be managing the toilet? What should be the governance structure for it? So should it be the community, like people who are users of the toilet, who would be most accountable to the community of users around it? Or should we be taking advantage of the private sector who may have special expertise in better management of toilets? Okay? So there are trade-offs here. Community might have better accountability to the users, but they may not be as professional in management. And that's a trade-off that we're going to try and evaluate and test. Okay? And if it is community management, what should the governance be like? So how do we put in this accountability structure? So if we select a set of managers for the toilets, how should they be? At what frequency should they be selected or elected? Should they be elected or selected? And what is our exit strategy if it's not working out? Okay? And then finally, the set of things that the JPAL side is very, very interested in is also answering some behavioral questions here. And the behavioral question we're interested in is figuring out whether or not we can make the use of toilets rather than defecating in the open a habit. Okay? And so we're motivated by the fact that there's a lot of things that we do out of habit without thinking about it, such as brushing our teeth every morning. Right? And there is, as strange as this may sound, even about 80, 90 years ago in the United States, toothbrushing was not a habit. Okay? And there were some very clever marketing strategies that led to that habit being formed. And so we're designing a set of interventions. I'm not going to go into the details of what they are, but set of interventions to look at whether or not it's possible to form habits around using a toilet. So when you wake up in the morning, the thing that automatically comes to your mind is to go to the toilet as opposed to going to defecating in the open. Okay, so Nirat, let me let you talk about the experimental and base layer. And then at the facility level, our intervention design is very, very simple. It's just a 2x2. So either you have the base toilet block or you have like a utility block. So that's what are in the 2 rows. And then each of these facilities could be either community managed or private sector managed. Right? So those are the 119 facilities being divided into these 4 blocks. And then within that, we have about 10,000 users who we'll collect data on. And then we're randomizing these habit formation experiments within that. Okay? And so now just to give you a sense of the complexity and the scale of this. So these are the main partners that we have, all of whom are actually present in this room. Okay? So there's a bunch of activities that are being led by JPAL and the team of researchers, so myself as well as Judy Chevalier at Yale and Sharon Barnhart, who's a JPAL affiliate at IFMR in Chennai. So we all, JPAL, and then Quicksand, the design studios that's taking the lead, along with their subcontractors in designing the toilets, such as architects in designing toilets. The city governments, as well as Feedback Foundation and CFAR, 2 non-government organizations who are helping us with implementation in these communities. Okay? So for defining the project, JPAL, Quicksand, and the 2 cities were involved. And then selecting locations, JPAL, Quicksand, and this is an ongoing negotiating process where we need to get permission for the sites where we're going to build toilets. So that's the stage we're in now. And then the architectural design, that's being led by Quicksand. The community engagement, so introducing our team to the community, introducing Project Sammaan to the community. We're relying on CFAR, who you'll hear from later today. And they are, and they have expertise in working with these communities. And then the facility construction will happen through a tender process that's issued by the government, and Quicksand will be involved. And then we, on the JPAL side, along with the designers, we collaborate on these management models. And without going through more and more of this, there's going to be a lot of data collection surrounding this, so data collection at the household level and at the facility level, and all of that is being coordinated through JPAL. So let me turn it over to Nirat now.
Thanks, Mushfiq. Before we start on the design process, I'd just like to invite Mr. Pati to say maybe a few things about BMC and their involvement in this project.
Good morning, everybody. I'm KP Pati, Krishna Prasad Pati. I'm Deputy Commissioner, Bhubaneswar Municipal Corporation. So I will be giving a brief introduction about the corporation and the city. Then I will pass it to Mr. Bhatnagar. Bhubaneswar is the capital city of Orissa. It is in the eastern part of India. It's a coastal city. Its history dates back to 1,000 years. And it is called the temple city of India because of, it is said that almost 1,000 temples existed at a point of time, but mostly it is also now a temple city because of its large number of temples. Its size is around 135 square kilometer and a population having around 10 lakh. And here the sanitation is a big problem. Although the city was planned by the renowned architect who planned also designed Chandigarh, but the sanitation, because of the, there are 377 slums, so because of slums and other problems, sanitation is a big problem in Bhubaneswar. To sort out the sanitation problem, we have adopted PPP mode we have adopted. Around there are 60 wards. In 40 wards we have privatized, given it to private for sanitation. But there are 377 slums, and sanitation in slums is a big concern for us. And for this, to take up the sanitation, to sort out and streamline the sanitation, we have signed MOU for Project Sammaan. The Project Sammaan, all of them, I mean, Mr. Mushfiq has also given a brief introduction about what is Project Sammaan. And this is just to enhance the dignity. So that is why it has been named accordingly. And Bill Gates Foundation, Quicksand, and J. Paul and BMC, it's a joint venture. And in this venture, we will be trying to give a developed version of sanitation, developed version of toilets. And there will be, as Mr. Mushfiq pointed out, there will be hardware and software components. And so the main idea is to make the city defecation free, open defecation free. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. So I'll very quickly, keeping the time in mind, I'll just rush through my slides. I mean, so there are a bunch of slides here which really talk about the innovation process, that the design-led, user-centered innovation process that Quicksand follows, and that we bring to bear on many consulting projects that we do with our clients and sanitation, and we've done a bunch of work in water and sanitation over the last 3 or 4 years. But the key idea that I really want to focus on is how is at a slightly meta design level, where you've got, traditionally you've got 2 ways of creating new things, right? Be it new products or new programs. You've got either a top-down, very, let's say, engineering or technology-led way, where you've got, let's say, people creating solutions. It's called the, so you've got, let's say, a researcher, a basic science researcher who creates a new molecule and hunts for a place where that molecule could find value. And similarly, you've got engineers who create a product and then look for appropriate markets where they could, where that product would serve some purpose, right? And on the other hand, you've got this whole stream of innovation which relies on the user and the needs which organically bubble up from the user. And this movement also has been sort of gathering a lot of momentum, especially you've got a bunch of, almost like an ecosystem of do-it-yourself innovation that's happening, and methods like the CLTS in sanitation, community-led total sanitation, where preferences of customers are taken into account. So those are the 2 streams. And for us, at Quicksand, we do believe very strongly at within the in the second way of doing things, where technology innovation needs to be anchored very tightly to user-centered needs, right? For us, this has been a very interesting project because of the RCT component, right? So we've kind of, what I'd like to really talk about is how both of these approaches could be sort of melded with or could be combined with rigorous evaluation. And the process that we've negotiated along with JPAL over the last few months has been super, super interesting, where we've actually defined blocks of utilities, right? So the basket of value that was being talked about earlier. So how you could design certain services, certain features into certain baskets of values, and then you could measure how and what value each of them brings. So very quickly, I mean, so design-led innovation has it's a five-step process where you spend a lot of time empathizing with the user. You rely on methods like ethnography and so on. At Quicksand, we are a very multidisciplinary team. We've got ethnographers, anthropologists, filmmakers, designers of all kinds, engineers, business thinkers, and so on. So you spend months and months in the slum context. For instance, in the prelude to Project Sammaan, we did this thing called Pati project of the Gates Foundation, which involved spending significant time in urban slums in India in 5 different cities, and then identifying innovation opportunities in 4 different buckets: architecture, communication, business models, operating models. So then we defined and ideated upon the opportunities. That really was a springboard for Project Sammaan, where you had, on our canvas, we had few ideas of what would work, and those actually have gone on to inform the features, both the software and the hardware features that Mushfiq was talking about in Project Sammaan. And then you test them, which the JPAL evaluation will do. So where we are in Project Sammaan right now is this fairly long research project got over late last year. Ideation on what we could do, what kind of new features we could design in architecture, in communication, in pricing, let's say, in operating models. I mean, we had initial brainstorms, a couple of iterations of design, and then finally, we're expecting to go into construction late this year. These are just some pictures from different settings. So you rely on a lot of methods to get feedback from communities. Some scenes from a studio where you're trying to actually brainstorm on how, let's say, differently abled people would negotiate these facilities. Some activity that's happening with communities in Orissa. So the 4 types of design outcomes, I mean, I really want to spend maybe just 3 or 4 more minutes on this. So we rely, so the first thing is to de-average your end consumer, and hence when evaluations also happen, so those evaluations happen on the de-average consumer. There's no such thing as the average slum resident. So you rely on personas. How an old person would actually use a sanitation facility would be very different from how a child would use it. And then based on these personas, you actually you design optimally designed services, right? So then you do UX blueprints, user experience blueprints, trying to see trying to get into the shoes of the user and trying to figure out in the morning routine how would they actually go about negotiating their morning activity. And if you look at this interestingly, each of these are elements that lend themselves to evaluation, right? If you tweak different aspects of this journey, you can enhance or reduce the user experience, which would ultimately drive adoption, which would ultimately drive, let's say, health outcomes, which are being evaluated, right? From the user experience blueprint, you come to design features at each stage. For instance, right now, like Mushfiq said, we're trying to expand the idea for toilet, and we're trying to make it a utility block where we're packaging things like bathing, clothes washing, shops, some related retail, and so on. So you're trying to decompose the journey into all those different elements, and you're trying to design features that adequately address user expectations at each of those stages, right? So these are some of the things we're trying to pack into our facilities. So the things are, there's some space constraints, there's some cost constraints, which are benchmarked to existing government guidelines. You're trying to pack in all those different things: toilets, bathrooms, universal access, kids' toilets, washing area, and so on. And there are some pictures of how the toilets, this is still interim. I mean, tweaks remain to be made. I mean, just showing how the flow happens. Going within stalls, trying to do a bunch of interesting stuff is going to happen within the stalls, and the kind of example that Mushfiq was talking about how, let's say, about 80, 90 years ago, toothpaste manufacturers tinkered around with messaging and communication to get people to use it. Similarly, there'll be some 2 or 3 different things that we'll try out, certain utilities like hand sprays or some other thing that we're thinking about within the toilet stall itself, within the community, which would then lend themselves to being evaluated fairly rigorously. So by placing maybe if we've got these 119 facilities and we've got about 1,200 toilet seats in all, 10 in 219. So placing one such utility or one such feature in 200 of them, seeing the additional adoption and so on. So that's really what I want to focus on. And the idea for us, it's been interesting how one can actually, even in a user-centered design approach, and like Mushfiq said, in an urban environment, in an urban government infrastructure environment where there are a bunch of complexities that need to be negotiated, if one can creatively design projects that lend themselves to evaluation, then I think pretty much in slightly simpler settings, one could do the same. So that's it from my end. Thank you.